Professor Alexandra Glizinska-Gravias, President Meir Linzen, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to open this conference, a real privilege, and I'm very honored. I had a look at the many topics you are going to deal with during these next hours, and I will try to give you my personal experience, and if I may, my personal recommendations on most of these main topics. As far as I understood, you are going to speak and to discuss on 5 or 6 main issues. One of them is anti-Semitism on campuses, which is, as you well know, as we all know, a big wave of hatred going all over the world, which did not start, by the way, because of the war, the retaliation by Israel against the pogrom of October 7, but which started on the very day of October 7. On October 8, the wave started. It happened that I went in America 1 year ago, and I made a big tour of 14 of the campuses which are touched, affected by this plague. I went personally to confront, body to body, soul to soul, these arguments and these haters. And it is not an easy task, but it is not an impossible task. And I can tell you, these 14 meetings I had in big audience room like this one, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller also, I did hold firm. I did had the last word, because I argued on the 3 main topics which they tried to put on the stage. I said that you accuse Israel of genocide. I know what a genocide is. A genocide does not allow to the population which is subject to genocide some corridors of evacuation. A genocide does not propose ceasefires. A genocide does not give warnings before waging battles of a war. You say that Israel is practicing apartheid. There is no Western country where a minority of Arabs, in the case of Israel, has in a such perfect way, all the rights of a citizen. We French, you Americans, should, far from despising the Israeli model, should admire a model where 20% of the population, Arabs, who are sometimes hostile to the very principle of the state, Zionism, are recognized 100% of the civil rights. No apartheid. You say that Israel was born out of a colonial process. It is just the opposite. Israel was the fruit of a war of liberation against the colonial empire of that time, English empire, and of course, the project of Nazi empire. When you go to campuses, when you develop these sort of arguments, when you go underground, and when you resist inch by inch, you can win. You can hold the stage, and you can go to the end of your speech. My experience. Boycott will be another of the topics we are going to discuss. Same. In the last 30 years, not only last year, I had a lot of debates, again, on the front line, as you said, President Meir Linzen. As you said, I had discussion on front line with the partisans of boycott. There are 2 or 3 arguments to which they cannot respond. They can be bad faith, they are animated by hate, but there is a point where arguments matter. When you tell them that when they boycott Israel as a whole, they boycott also partisans of peace, as in Paris recently, the Philharmonic Orchestra of Israel, it's an argument which makes them speechless. When you tell them that condemning a country as a whole is a form of stigmatization, again, it's difficult to reply. And when you tell them that the ideological root of the campaign of boycott against Israel starts in 1948 or 1945 in the Arab world, under the influence of Nazi people who escaped the defeated Germany and who created the body of arguments of the boycott, when you tell them that the archaeology, the genealogy of boycott has its roots in the Nazi period, again, it's impossible to reply to that, and you make a point. You don't make a point with those who, whatever the argument, will hate us, of course. But in the middle, in those who are, as we say in French, le marais, the middle, people who are hesitating, wavering, you make a point for sure. This is my contribution to this part of your conference. You are going to speak about Holocaust and law and Holocaust. I'm coming from a country, France, as you can hear, where there is laws against Holocaust deniers. We are not the only one, but we are a country when there is strong laws and where Holocaust denial is considered not as an opinion, but as a crime. I agree with that. But I think it is not sufficient again. It's not sufficient because by doing that, you offer on a silver plate to those who commit Holocaust denial, you give them the pleasure, the shivering, the privilege of the transgression. They transgress, they cross the border of what is admittable and so on and so on. So it's not enough to condemn. It's not enough to give them the privilege of being banned by the society of the elite, of the high society, and so on. Again, you have to argue foot after foot, inch after inch. And there are 2 arguments which I often develop when I am in front of assemblies where you have some people who don't really know, who are intoxicated by the propaganda of Holocaust denial. And there are 2 arguments which really shake these middle people. The 2 arguments are the following. There are, in the history of mankind, a lot of massacres, a lot of bloodbath. History has been a succession of bloodbath and a lot of genocides, starting with the Armenian genocide, going to the genocide in Rwanda and a few others, Darfur and so on, which, by the way, for the most recent one, which I covered personally. I have a direct experience of what the genocide is in Darfur, Sudan, in Rwanda. The genocide against Jews, the Holocaust, the Shoah, has two characteristics. This is fact, it is not ideology. Two characteristics which are unprecedented, which don't have any other example in any other case. The two characteristics are that Holocaust was a genocide without sans reste et sans recours, without remaining and without recourse. Without remaining means it's the only genocide in history who said that everyone, men, women, children, crippled, and even memory, even books, had to be eradicated from the surface of the earth. And without recourse, without possibility to escape, means in the thinking of the Nazis, the Holocaust of the Jews left no solution of exit for anyone. Armenians, it was the first genocide, it was horrible. There was a theoretical possibility for any victim of genocide to escape, to go to any country out of Turkey or out of the Ottoman Empire, which was in process of being destroyed. Genocide in Darfur, which I saw with my eyes, the generals in Khartoum implementing the genocide did not forbid the people of Darfur to go to Chad. The genocide of the Jews is the only one who said that all the world was a stage for genocide. That all the world was a trap for the Jewish prey hunted by the anti-Semitic mob. So, nothing should remain. No place for relief. These are the characteristics which make the Holocaust unique. It does not mean that we don't have to fight as human beings and as Jews against all the other genocide which appear or start to appear. But to combat Holocaust denial means to repeat on and on what is the specificity of the Holocaust. You will have another discussion about international law. And as far as I understand, what should be the position of Jewish organizations, State of Israel, and Jews in general facing the two IGC and CPI. This for a Jew is a real problem because, as we know, there is a systematic bias of both courts of The Hague. I did not see since 50 years even a little bit, even a few % of the resolutions against Israel applied to those who commit massacres in Sudan, against Russia in Chechnya, and so on and so on. It is the extent of the hatred against Israel has no example, no point of comparison. There is a sort of compulsion, a sort of insistence, maniac, a sort of madness against Israel. The last examples are, of course, in the last 2 years, the CPI condemning at the same level the chief of the Hamas and the prime minister of Israel, putting them back to back, doing as if they were equal criminals and launching arrest warrants against them. What should we do and what should you do in your capacity in front of that? There is a temptation, of course, to say, okay, we leave the stage. It's not our business, it's desperate. I don't think so. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think that whatever the bias, whatever the hostility, these two courts are emanations of the international, at least IJC, of the international community, of the body and the UN, and we don't have to leave the stage. We don't have to quit the debate. We have to build activist activities also there. I heard what President Herzog said. There is one example when Jewish organization, State of Israel, achieved something very important in the UN. The only example in the history of UN where a resolution was erased, was cancelled. It was due to lawyers, due to Jewish activists. It is the infamous resolution of 1975, equating Zionism and racism, which was cancelled after 15 years of a strong debate in 1991 or 1992. Guerrilla, by lawyers, by activists, by citizens, by NGOs, like United Nations Watch, pays, is useful. It is worth doing this job. And I remember the time when I was a child when Israel had a strong activity in the UN, tried to play the game, tried and achieved to get some allies. One man, one vote, one country, one vote. And it worked, sort of worked. We should not abandon this battle. We, Israel, and us, and especially you, in your capacity and with the strength of your organization. Last, I think you will discuss about the right and the left, how the Jews of today should stand in this political world battle which is waging without us, but sometimes against us. I just would like to say one word about that. There is one historical move, recent one, which is the fact that the anti-Semitism is moving slowly from right to left. This is undeniable. When I was a child, anti-Semitism was massively on the right wing of the political chess all over the world. Today, in this moment of my life, I'm obliged to see and to say that the compass is moving and that the fiercest anti-Semitism, because of anti-Zionism, because of denial of Holocaust, because of relativization of whatever, is moving more and more left. This is a fact. Nevertheless, my belief is that there can be here a trap for all of us. And even if this is a fact, we should be very careful in our alliances, in our ways of embracing or endorsing new friends who appear, who pretend to be our shield, our protectors. We should be very careful. Jewish people is a very little and weak people at the end of the day. Israel is a very little country, a handkerchief, surrounded by enemies. And there is a duty of wisdom, which is to be very cautious in the choice of alliance. As they say in America, bipartisan. There can be a president who is very friendly to Israel. I'm sure, I am grateful to him. But I will never take for granted and forever his friendship and the friendship of his allies. I know the biblical quote, that after Pharaoh always comes another Pharaoh in Egypt. After a president will come another president. And even if there is not another president, the same president, Pharaoh, can turn into another Pharaoh himself. And you have in the surrounding of the President of America, for example, you have some people who are really not our friends. You know that. So I really recommend in this debate to be grateful when signs of friendship are given, but to keep in mind that you don't stop to be anti-Semite just by decree, just by decision. You don't stop to be anti-Semite when you have been bred with anti-Semitism overnight by a decision of a political bureau or by because you think that it is a good move or a good deal. This is true for America, it is true for France, it is true for all over the world. So I recommend on this matter to be very careful. And last and not least, I know you will, and I finish with that, I know you will talk about the relationship between diaspora and Israel, domestic policy in Israel, how diaspora should act in front of that. Do we have, us Jews of diaspora, our word to say in these sort of debates? What about the divisions, the split, which we are sometimes feeling around the Jewish communities in the world? I would just like to say that the builders of Zionism, those who conceived Zionism, the first Zionist Congress in Basel, where Herzl was present, took into account these questions. They knew that the Jewish people was walking on two legs, the leg of land and feet on the land, and the leg of the galut, the exile, the diaspora. And Theodor Herzl himself, and all of them, and Gershom Scholem, and Max Nordau, all the right-wing, left-wing builders of Zionism knew that these two components of Jewish world had to work together to feed each other in a sort of dialectic. It is still true today. My recommendation, my dream, and it could be something that IJL does and recommends. I dream of the people of Israel having, as many people in the world, two chambers, two Knesset. There is one Knesset in Tel Aviv, the Knesset, which decides on the big domestic questions which Israel has to face and the international challenges. Why not for the other part of the Jewish world, the diaspora? Why not another Knesset? As we had before, in the past, in many times, in Middle Age, in the 19th century, a Sanhedrin. Why not a law chamber, a senate of the Jewish people, which will be settled, which would have his residence in Israel or outside, which would represent all the colors, all the aspects, all the tendencies of the Jewish world, and which would have to give as such its advice, its opinion on all matters which concern the people of Israel, of the Jewish people, including in Israel. This has not been done yet. You have Jewish lobbies, you have groups of influence, you have AIPAC, you have the European Jewish Congress, you have the American, you have a lot of organizations who deal with the Jewish life, who try to unite the Jewish people, who try to defend Israel, but a body joining all the parts of the Jewish constituencies around the world and having a word to say, consultative, not decision, about also all aspects of Jewish life, including Israel, might be the best reply in order to prevent this split which we are all feeling, in order to feed the good dialectic between the two wings of the Judaism, and might be one of the ways to reinforce this treasure, this masterpiece, which is the state of Israel. Israel is the masterpiece, a treasure for the nations and a treasure for the Jewish people. All has to be tried and implemented to save the treasure. This idea of which I just mentioned could be one of the way, and I think that your voice, all of you here, could be really a great help to push this sort of ideas. These are my preliminary remarks, which I launch very briefly for the discussion. It's up to you now during the day to do, of course, to refine and to go much further than I could do in these first remarks. Ladies, gentlemen, I thank you very much.